today. Um, this presentation is a long time in coming. Avery was here as a 7th grader, then left, and then came back last year to follow their passions and has learned a lot along the way, and has learned a lot this year. When Avery came back last year and said, I want to become a taxidermist and I want to learn how to do that, that was the first person in Vienna's history, I think, who said they wanted to do that. So I had to learn a lot, and Avery had to learn a lot. We did, right? And I think the community has learned a lot along the way also. We've learned that coyotes can fit in our freezer. We've learned that opossums soaking in buckets kind of get stinky sometimes. We've learned a lot about the project process overall, following our passions, and growing personally along the way. So Avery is going to share a little bit about taxidermy and carcass today. Avery Van Dalen, everybody.
Before I begin, I just want to mention that there are pictures of dead animals in my slideshow. People ask me, how can you be vegetarian and do things with dead animals? Well, to me that answer is simple. I want to honor the animal in its past life, but I don't want to kill the animal for that, because that'll just defeat the purpose. I use bones that I found out in the woods, roadkill, and animals that were hunted with no purpose after it was shot. Another thing that inspires me most is the indigenous culture on animals, mostly the part where they use the whole animal and not wasting any part of it like people now. In this presentation, I'll be talking about my past, the process of taxidermy, and then my project process. As most of you know, my name is Avery, and my senior project is on the art of the afterlife. Since I was a small child, I absolutely loved animals and bugs. Little me would turn over rocks for bugs every day. I remember my favorite bug I found were roly-polies. I would capture them and play with them in one of my doll houses. But this isn't about bugs, this is about animals. Growing up, I would go camping a lot over the summer with my family. That's where I would capture frogs, newts, toads, and snakes. I would always love to explore the woods. Now, my fascination with animal bones began when I was 12. We were in Wisconsin Dells that summer, and my dad found out about this amusement park called Fort Dells that closed down in 1985 and was demolished in 1997, with a few things left behind that he wanted to explore with me. At that time, I love abandoned locations. I would watch videos on people exploring abandoned places or buildings. So I really wanted to go. Early one morning, we went to that abandoned amusement park to check it out. I think it was when we started leaving, we stumbled upon a raccoon skull. I was really excited and I wanted to keep it, but my dad said no. So I kept begging, and eventually he let me take it back to the hotel room. That raccoon skull sat on the balcony we had of our hotel room until we went back home. From that time on, my fascination with animal bones grew. Very slowly at first, but it grew more when I was about 16. I found a whole squirrel skeleton in a tree at a park, and so I brought it home. At the time, I thought you cleaned animal bones with bleach. Not recommended to clean animal bones with bleach, but I had to learn from my mistake. I ended up cleaning the raccoon skull I found when I was 12 with the squirrel skeleton I found with the bleach. Now, cleaning bones with bleach can make them yellow, sticky, and brittle. After that day, I learned to clean bones with hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide cleans the bones and makes them white. From my sophomore year, I started collecting more and more bones. I would go bone hunting in wooded areas and look for remains of animals, sometimes coming out empty-handed. It wasn't until my junior year I wanted to do more with the art of dead animals. I wanted to do something more than collect bones. I started to paint and draw on animal bones, creating my own little creations on the bones. I then started to get more interested in the art of taxidermy towards the end of my junior year. I wanted to learn more about the process and how it's done. I attempted to do a taxidermy project last January, but ended up not doing the taxidermy, but just the skinning and tanning part of the process. There are 2 steps you need to do before the actual taxidermy: fleshing and tanning. Fleshing is when you skin the skin off the carcass of the animal. It's interesting how the skin just peels off the muscle of the animal with the help of a knife. Another step that is important during the fleshing phase is splitting the face. It's where you split the ears so it's more like a pocket, separating the skin from the lip line, peeling any fat tissue away from the eyes, and splitting the septum part of the nose. Splitting the face comes after the skin is fully removed from the carcass. The tanning comes after the fleshing. Tanning is a process to preserve the skin from decomposing. Tanning is less hands-on than fleshing. It is honestly just a lot of sitting around waiting for the skin to soak up for 2 days. Tanning is a long process of basically you doing nothing. What I mean is that you do nothing while the skin does its thing in some sort of solution. The tanning starts with a rehydration bath, followed by the pickling, which is more of an acidic solution. After the pickling, you shave the skin on the flesh side so it's thinner. This helps the skin tan better later. Once the shaving is done, you put it in a neutralization bath to remove the acid. Once it is done, you degrease the hide. Degreasing the hide is an important step because it gets all the grease out of the hide so it's not greasy after. Some animals are more greasy than others, such as raccoons, coyotes, and opossums. Then finally, you put the hide in a tanning solution. The tanning step is the last step of preserving the hide, but there is a step you should do after. It's called breaking or softening. This step helps the hide stretch and break any fibers to help the hide be more flexible. There's an optional step that is not required for taxidermy, but can be used if you want the hide for another purpose, and that is oiling. Oiling is where you put oil on the flesh side of the hide, just to make that part a little softer. For the actual taxidermy, you need a form. A form is the shape of an animal like a coyote, raccoon, otter, squirrel, etc. A form is used to put the skin on. It has the shape of an animal of your choice, and it makes the taxidermy more realistic, other than some blob with animal skin over it. Most of the time, the form is made out of foam, wood, and wire. Getting a form can be pretty expensive, but that doesn't mean you can build your own. Building your own animal form would be more difficult, and more research needs to be done on the animal anatomy to get it accurate. When buying an animal form, you need to measure your hide or carcass first so the hide can fit over the form. You want the hide to fit just right, not too loose or else the hide would crack. While doing this process, you need to keep the hide damp and don't let it dry out or get too dry. Having the hide damp will make it easier to put on the form. A dried out hide would be hard and stiff. It is required to have a hide kept damp if you're going to do the full taxidermy process on your animal. Sometimes when you test fit the hide over the form, you have to make some adjustments, such as adding more foam for bigger adjustments, clay for smaller adjustments, or even just shaving down the form if it's just a tad too big for the hide. It is really rare to get a hide to perfectly fit on the form on the first go. Before finally putting the hide on the form, you should sew any holes that were made from the fleshing process on the flesh side. It is easier this way because once the hide is on the form, it would be harder to sew any smaller holes on the hide. Usually before putting the hide on the form, you need to set the face, such as adding fake eyes, eyelids, and eyebrows, tucking the lips, making the nose more natural and nose-like, and making the ears be ear-shaped for the animal. To set the face, taxidermists usually use clay for the face and then ear liners or Bondo for the ears. Bondo is a filler that is used in auto body repair, but is commonly used by taxidermists for their mounts. After setting the face, and the form has been fully adjusted to fit the hide, put your hide on the form one last time. First the face, making any final adjustments to the face while your hide is on the form, then putting the rest of the hide on the form once the face is how you want it. This is a part where you have to do a lot of sewing. You want to get the sewing just right, so you shouldn't speed up. You should take your time and pay attention to detail. If it's sloppy, it's obviously not going to look good. The sewing part is where you sew any cuts that were made while skinning the animal. Usually the cuts from the fleshing process are strategic, so you could easily fit the hide over the form. Most of the time, the bigger cuts are either on the back or stomach and on the legs. When the hide is on the form for the last time, you sew any of the bigger cuts that were made on the hide on the form. Once all the sewing is done, the skin dries on the form for about 2 weeks. A good method is to cover your taxidermy in a bag loosely so it doesn't dry too fast. Having it dry slowly helps you make any adjustments on the taxidermy. Like if any stitches come loose, you can tighten them, or if the face shifts a little, you can adjust it while it's still a little damp. There's such a thing called hide paste that you can put on the form before putting it on the hide. It's more recommended for advanced taxidermists because if you get hide paste on the fur, it won't come out and the fur would be ruined. There's also a way to glue the hide onto the form as well. I myself didn't really do much gluing, so I don't really know much about this process. But most of the time, if the hide fits perfectly on the form, you could just let it dry on the form. For my project, I wanted to do full taxidermy on a coyote with my own little twist. I know some of you might be wondering how I got my hands on a coyote for my project. Well, last year, I started a taxidermy project that became more of a tanning project, and I wanted a coyote. Me and my advisor ended up finding someone that was in charge of a coyote hunting contest in February. I did not participate in the hunting contest, but the guy who was in charge gave me a coyote to work. The coyote I have now wasn't going to have any purpose afterwards, so the hunter was excited to see the coyote not go to waste. Originally, the coyote was supposed to be part of my last year's project, but towards the end of my tanning project last year, I decided to save the coyote for my senior project, when I realized it would be a way bigger project than I thought it was going to be. So as some of you may know, the coyote sat in the freezer for over a year before I started to work on it. Yes, I did hear some of the rumors about him. All of them weren't true, and people were scared of him in the freezer. I would tell people he wouldn't bite. While the coyote sat in the freezer, me and Miss Kay were trying to figure out where to do this project so we don't have another opossum apocalypse like last year. One day, when we were talking to one of my live sources, he ended up offering his tanning studio for me to work in. And I just want to clarify that it's not a tanning salon, but a tannery to flesh tan and do taxidermy on animals. My live source, Cam, owned the Wild Game and Finishing LLC near Dale. There he tanned skins for customers and prepared their skin for taxidermy or any other purpose the customer wanted from the animal skin. He also does taxidermy himself. I met a few of his employees, Amanda and Blake. I mostly worked with Cam and Amanda, but Blake did help me with some sewing and fleshing for my coyote. Working there for my senior project was really fun. It was good for me to work with an expert rather than trying to wing it by myself and possibly messing up big time on probably the only coyote I would get my hands on for this project. When I brought my coyote over, he took a look at the coyote I had. It turned out my coyote was in terrible condition, but I was willing to work with what I had. Cam did offer that he could get me another animal to work on because he knew people, but I declined that offer because I didn't want an animal to be killed just for it to be part of my art. That didn't really feel right to me. I don't want an animal's purpose to be killed just for it to be art. Anyways, it seems like my coyote was shot with a cannon. Yes, there was a big gaping hole over in the left arm. I mean, since it was killed for a contest, the main goal was for it to be killed, not to be kept in good condition. There were 2 other coyotes that the guy in charge of the contest had that were in a lot worse condition than the one I got. I had a little help with the start of the cutting of my coyote. We started with the paws of my coyote first, front and back. Both of the back legs, I went all the way down to the anus of the coyote with a knife. From there, I started to peel the skin back with a lot of force. Since the coyote was frozen for so long, there was a lot of force that had to go into it. I had a little help with some tools they had in the building. The coyote was hung by his back legs, and the front legs were tied together and hooked to the floor. I was able to make the hook that the back legs were on, that were hanging from, to go up so there would be more force. The types of knives I used were a long handle scalpel and a bunch of razor blades. I also used some more regular looking knives they had at the tannery. I had a lot of help on the face of the coyote. I didn't really skin much of the face, but I did do some of the splitting on the face once the skin was off the carcass. I had some help with the eyes and the lips, but I did the ear, but I did an ear and most of the lips. I have tried using a necker knife on the fleshing beam there, but I was really struggling. It could be because the coyote was frozen for so long. It is honestly better to do all the fleshing as soon as possible while the carcass is still fresh, but I had some help from Blake who did the rest of the fleshing for me. Once the fleshing was done, I salted the hide. Salting the hide is an important step to preserve the hide. It's kind of the same how canned stuff is kept preserved, like canned fruits, vegetables, and soups. From this point, Cam ended up doing most of the tanning since I thought it would be unnecessary for me to stop by for just 2 minutes to watch him put a hide in a pickling or tanning solution. So he did most of the tanning, but I did stop by to watch him thin the skin before putting it back into the pickle. He had some sort of shaving machine he used on the skins to make the skin side of the hide thinner. Thinning the hide helps the hide be softer and less stiff in the future, and it will cause less fur slippage. Cam didn't teach me how to use the machine because it was dangerous and I could easily mess with the coyote hide. He also thought there would be no point in teaching me how to use it just for this one project I brought in. After shaving, the coyote was placed back into the pickle solution. When I came back to the tannery, the coyote was basically ready for the tannery part. We test fitted the hide on the form, and apparently I got pretty lucky. Me and Miss K were worried the form wasn't going to fit the hide since we didn't really do any measurements and ordered the form as soon as I turned in my money request. But my coyote almost fit the form perfectly. We just had to add another 4 inches since he was more on the long side. Before putting the hide on the form, we cut all 4 legs off to make it easier to slip the hide over the form. We then took the hide off the form to make those adjustments. Me and Cam made some sort of a contraction to pour foam in the 4 inches. But before that, we sawed the head off of the form because I was going to put the skull there. Before I left the tannery that day, Cam gave me some homework before I see him again next week. My homework was to sew the tail together. In the fleshing process, the tail had to be split down the middle to get the tailbone out. If the tailbone wasn't removed, the tail would rot. I did finish sewing the tail. The day I went over to the tannery again, we secured the skull to the form using a screw and some more foam to keep the skull in place. I had to super glue the bottom jaw later though, to not risk the bottom jaw breaking off while putting the hide over the form. That day, the hide was put on the form for the last time. I started sewing the leg shut, but I did not finish that day, so I had to come back again. This was the last day I would go to the tannery for my coyote. That day, I finished sewing up the legs and finished gluing around the large holes from it being shot on my coyote so the hide would stay in place while it dried. While the glue dried, I had to put pins around the hole so the hide would stay on the glue. Amanda also helped me with the base of my coyote, which is the log Miss Ludke gave to me. Amanda drilled holes into the log and cut down the wires that were on the bottom of the feet so the coyote could fit on the log. After my last day at the tannery, I started gluing fake greenery on the coyote where all the parts of the form were showing. Oops. While standing here now, my coyote is not finished, but I will continue to work on him before the end of school. It does take up 2 weeks for the hide to dry, and I can't secure him to the base until he's done drying. I didn't want to do traditional taxidermy on the coyote because I wanted to be more expressive with it. This type of taxidermy is called rogue taxidermy. Rogue taxidermy breaks the traditional method but still follows similar processes. I chose to add more of a decaying look, kind of like the look of animals when they're in their decaying process in the wild, but more in a lifelike way. I wanted to do something where the skull was coming out of the hide with fake greenery around it. With the help of my friends, I named my coyote Leaf, and I'm going to donate him to the school when I leave and when he is finished. Other than my coyote, my process on this project started out kind of rough. I wanted to start in the summer before my senior year, but I ended up not doing much. Beginning of the year, I was more focused on my products than my notes. I think I started my note-taking like halfway through the school year. For my notes, I decided to take them in a notebook. Unlike most seniors, I didn't know what note existed, so I never really used it. I thought a notebook would be easier for me because that's how I've been taking notes my whole life. I use mostly books and live sources rather than things online. I didn't really focus much on the note-taking part because I felt like my project was more production-based. But I wanted to learn some more about taxidermy since I was more focused on the tanning process my junior year. In my production phase, my project was also kind of all over the place. In the beginning of the year, I started working more on my smaller products. But after the note-taking, I started to focus more on my bigger product, my coyote. Lastly, I wanted to do some sort of art show for my project. A dream of mine is to share my art with the world, so this was my small step into that. I didn't really want to have an event all about me, but I knew there were many other artists at VNS that might want to share their art with others too. So I involved the VNS community to be part of the first VNS art show. Even though I didn't get that many people signed up or that many people attending the event, I still had a good time planning and putting it all together. I do appreciate Theo, Ash, Satya, Max, Roger, Isaac, and Annabeth who are part of the art show. Without them, I wouldn't be able to have this event. For my future, I've been accepted and planning on attending the Art Institute of Chicago this fall to continue this kind of art I'm interested in. I chose this school because of the freedom of art choices they have, and I feel like that would benefit me more for what I want to do in the future after college. I'm also going to be doing more work at Cam's Tannery over the summer before college with my own projects, and I get the guidance of professionals so I can keep learning the process of taxidermy. I want to say thank you to my family, Miss Kolowski, Miss Lukey, Mr. Bush, Cam, Amanda, and Blake, my friends with their support, the students who were in and supported the art show, and never one of my live sources, Mr. Resch, Juniper, Sleeping Sirens Oddities, Moondog Madness, and Miss Fornes. Thank you all for listening. Is there any questions? Are we done?
I think we are.
Mom?
I just want to say that is absolutely beautiful. The more I look at it,
My mom said that she thinks my coyote is really beautiful the more she looked at it. And I just want to say he's still a work in progress. I have mentioned that. But he's still being worked on.
it's beautiful.
Cameron?
Advice for future seniors.
Cameron asked the advice for future seniors. To be honest, I do agree with what the seniors before me said, but I do think that future seniors should pick something that's sort of been in their life, something that's been in their whole life, even if it like changes shape or form, like it's something that's always there with them. Because I just feel like that if you pick something that's been there with you your whole life, it would be easier to do this project on, because it's, yeah. Maple?
Are you planning on pursuing taxidermy as a career?
Maple asked if I'm planning on pursuing taxidermy as a career. Yeah, but not like traditional taxidermy. Like I've been kind of trying to do things my own way. Miss Fornes?
So you started your taxidermy project last year. What advice would you have given yourself at the beginning of that initial project?
Miss Fornes asked what advice I would give myself for my last year's taxidermy/tanning project. Not to use some cheap tanning kit off Amazon because I got really bad results, but like they were still like preserved. It's just the skins were really stiff and they were really greasy. It's either that I did not do a good job on it or the supplies that were in the kit weren't good, but yeah. Phoebe?
I had a lot of fun watching you skin the animal last year. I forgot what animal it was, but
It's probably an opossum.
yeah. Why can't I watch you do more? That was like such a like insightful experience, I guess.
Phoebe asked when she can watch me do more skinning of animals. If you want to join me at the tannery this summer, you can, because I'm probably going to be doing more of that. Theo?
What bones do you find most often, like when you're searching for them?
Theo asked what kind of bones do I find often. Around here, it's like a lot of like deer bones and raccoon. I realize it's not really much like opossum or like predators. There's not many predators around here. But yeah, it's mostly just like deer. And when it's deer, the skull is usually never there. So I feel like people beat me to it. But yeah, it's just like deer and raccoon. Robin?
Would you ever consider doing bug taxidermy with bug pinning?
Robin asked me if I would ever consider doing bug pinning. Yeah, I've been thinking about it actually, because it'll be kind of cool to add like real pin, not like having them pinned, but like, you know, when they're dried out, to be part of my taxidermy. I think that would be really cool. Milo?
What was the hardest part of your project and the part you were most proud of?
Milo asked what was the hardest part of my project and what was the part I was most proud of. The hardest part of my project was taking notes. I did a lot of like research about something very similar last year, so I felt like it wasn't really necessary, but I still wanted to learn more about the taxidermy process. And then the part that I'm most proud of is my coyote over there. I don't know, it's just like, I never thought I could do something like that. I know I had like a lot of help on the way, but like I still did most of it, and I'm pretty proud of myself for that. Cameron?
I saw you had Invincible out there. Should people watch Invincible?
Cameron asked if people watch Invincible, and like, oh, if people should watch Invincible. Yeah, it's a pretty good show.
Pretty good.
Robin?
Just a follow-up, if you do ever want to do bug pinning, I can help out. And also, did Tom the raccoon count as a product?
Robin asked if Tom the raccoon counted as a product. Yeah, I actually did them in a class, and there was a lot of shortcuts that were taken. I didn't really include the classes, but I did mention that I did thank the people that ran the class. I don't know, there's a lot of shortcuts, so it's not really the best quality, but it was also my first time doing taxidermy. It was kind of fun. Maple?
Have you noticed that there have been a lot of dead possums in the streets around Appleton lately?
Maple asked if I noticed there's been a lot of dead opossums in the streets of Appleton lately. Yes. I can't remember ever seeing a dead opossum when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like, they just started appearing out of nowhere. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, mind
You know
blown.
why.
Like, they're just like, why are people hitting them now? Or they just, like, started, maybe their population grew. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Abby?
Have you ever found an animal skull, and where?
Abby asked if I ever found an animal skull and where. I actually found quite a few. I'm gonna tell two stories. When I was hiking with my dad, me and my dad found a buck skull tied to a tree with fishing line, and the antlers were sawed right off. I know it's kind of sad that they just wanted the antlers and not the skull, 'cause the skull is pretty cool. But that was a weird place to find a skull. And then when I found my first deer skull at Wisconsin Dells too. Funny story. I was trudging out in the woods with my little sister. And then, you know, we were at the point where we were gonna start heading back. And then when I turned my head, there was like a pile of deer bones, and like the whole deer was there. And the thing is, I didn't have anything to carry all of it in. I was pretty excited. So I just had a sweatshirt on, no shirt underneath. So I took off my sweatshirt and I made it so the sweatshirt was like a bag, and I carried all the deer bones in my sweatshirt, and I walked back basically shirtless. Miss Ludke?
The rogue taxidermy piece, is that something that you were inspired by seeing other artists or other rogue? Is there like a whole genre of that? And then how does yours compare to other rogue taxidermies?
Miss Lukey asked if I... Can you repeat that? That was a lot.
Were you inspired by other rogue taxidermy?
Miss Lukey asked if I was inspired by other rogue taxidermy. Yes, I have seen pictures on Pinterest, kind of similar to what I did. And I was really inspired by it. And then, like, after that, I started learning more about rogue taxidermy. It's becoming more common now, I think. But yeah. Mom?
Did any part of the process make you feel squeamish?
My mom asked if any part of the process made me feel squeamish. Not really. I actually thought it was more interesting than kind of like, I don't know. But I do want to mention when I started fleshing the coyote, I did have a hard time cutting him, but I had to keep telling myself, it's dead, he's dead, he doesn't feel anything, so it's okay. So I was like worried I was hurting the coyote while doing it, but I wasn't, he was already dead. Theo?
Are you still doing bone painting commissions?
Theo asked if I'm still doing bone painting commissions. Yeah, but Wisconsin has some laws on that kind of stuff. I know, like, for duck bones, you need, like, a taxidermy permit to possess duck bones. But, like, it's also kind of weird because I feel like you could just simply own duck bones because they are, like, a haunted bird. I don't know, Wisconsin has a lot of weird taxidermy laws on birds, but and same thing with like bones, you need like a taxidermy permit to sell any sort of part of a dead animal, so I kind of stopped. Maybe I won't sell them, but I might just give them to people.
You could ask for a donation.
Okay, yeah. Tegan?
What's your like dream animal to work on?
Tegan asked what's my dream animal to work on. I don't know. I would say opossum, but I kind of did like the tanning process of it like last year. But I think it'll be like super cool to do like the full taxidermy on an opossum because I love opossums. I think they're pretty cool. Miss K?
You briefly mentioned the class that you took, which was a different experience with another piece of taxidermy that resulted from that. And then you also mentioned Mr. Rush on your last slide. Can you tell us a little bit more about the story of those two events? Tell us more about the class.
Miss K wants me to tell a little bit of more story of the first taxidermy class I took and my other live source. The taxidermy class, it was actually held at the Oddities and Curiosities Expo in Milwaukee during like really early April. I don't know, when I signed up for the class, I thought it would have been like the whole raccoon, but it turns out a whole raccoon would take up like a whole day. So we ended up just doing the head, and that was already 6 hours. And I did think about doing like some sort of like activity during my presentation with taxidermy, but I feel like that would have been impossible from my experience. It's just a raccoon head takes up to 6 hours, even more if you're like newer. And then with my live source, Mr. Resch, he was a teacher at Hortonville. actually holds a taxidermy class there, but he hasn't been running them recently because not many people signed up for them. But his science room is like really cool. There's like a whole bunch of taxidermy all around there and like bones. I thought it was really cool in there. I don't know, I also learned a lot from him from like cleaning bones. I tried his method. With his method, it was like 30% hydrogen peroxide and some sort of carbon hydrate powder. I ended up getting some of that hydrogen peroxide on my skin and it kind of burned. So it went for my glove. I did wear gloves. But I don't know, I might use that method in the future because it seems to clean the bones better than what I've been doing, makes them more white. But it was kind of hard to get all that powder sludge in all the nooks and crannies with what I had because I didn't have enough. Theo?
Can you do taxidermy on, like, animals other than mammals?
Theo asked if I can do taxidermy on animals other than mammals. I would love to. Like, I would love to learn about the process of taxidermy on birds. So, like, I actually got, like, a chicken, like a little chick, and a duckling from the expo. And I was looking at it, and I'm like, how do they get the beak in there? Because the beak is part of the skull. And, like, do they clean the skull and then put the skull on the form? Like, I don't understand it, and that's something I would like to learn, especially since they have feathers and not fur. But I feel like mammals is actually like a good thing, a better thing for beginners, because I feel like birds might be a little bit difficult, but I would love to look more into that. I actually found a dead robin one time on a walk, and I took it home with me and then realized it's illegal to possess a dead robin, so I threw it out in the woods. So I was a little disappointed because I thought I was actually going to learn how to do taxidermy on something, on a bird, I mean. So yeah. Robin?
With bird taxidermy, it's usually a fake beak, not real.
But the ones I had, the beak looked really weird, real. Veronica?
You seem to have found an amazing life source, so what is your advice on finding and contacting a good life source?
Veronica asked, what's a good method to contact a good live source? I actually found Cam through Mr. Resch because Cam was originally one of Mr. Resch's students in the past. So I don't know, I guess I suggest like find a live source and see if they know any more people, because that's how I kind of found Cam. Miss Fornes?
How do modern tanning methods compare to more of the traditional tanning methods?
Miss Fornes asked, what do the modern tanning methods compare to traditional,
Like how
older methods?
like the First Nations, how they more like
Yeah.
ancient cultures.
I did hear a little bit about brain tanning, and I think that's where you use the brain of the animal to tan the hide. I don't know much about it. I would like to look into it, but I have heard a little bit about it, and I think it's interesting how they use the brain of the animal to tan the hide. But yet again, I don't know much about the history, that much of the history of taxidermy, so. Alex?
Is there any animal that you wouldn't taxidermy?
Is there? Alex asked if there was any animal I wouldn't taxidermy. Probably fish. I'm not really that interested in fish. I do think fish are cool. I'm just not interested. I don't even collect fish bones. Like, I don't know. They're just not interesting because they're kind of like all over the place. Like, you can get a fish at like a supermarket or something. Like,